Tell us when we're on.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody to the Community Growth and Infrastructure Steering Committee meeting agenda for August 23rd, 2021. In attendance, we have Councillor Broadhead, Mayor Herron, Councillor Watkins, myself. We also have Councillor Mackay, and I'm not sure, I can't see if anybody else is on. And so Councillor Jolly and Councillor Hughes are not with us today. Welcome to everybody. First, we will call the meeting to order and then adopt the agenda. Can I have somebody adopt the agenda? Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the August 23rd, 2021 Community Growth and Infrastructure Standing Committee meeting agenda be adopted as presented.
Any comments from anybody? In favor?
Or do I have to use my voting paddles?
That is unanimous.
Anybody with them?
Unanimous. On to the minutes of July 12th. Are there any errors or omissions that anybody picked out? If not, Councillor Watkins, you want to move that?
I'll move that the minutes of the it's up there, but the Community Growth and Infrastructure Standing Committee minutes of July 12th, 2021 be adopted as presented.
Any comments?
No.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you so much. And then we're moving on to the meat of the agenda, which is new business audit management recommendations presented by Brenda Barkley, Manager of Financial Operations. Brenda, it's yours.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you. I'll give you a quick summary of the agenda report that's in your package, and then I'll take any questions after if you have any. So,
Great.
like I said, good afternoon. This audit management report is an annual report to give an update on administration's progress on the 2020 audit recommendations from Kpmg. During the 2020 audit, there were two new areas identified as recommendations for improvement. The first recommendation was to clarify what represents the city's approved operating budget in accordance with the public sector accounting principles. So for this, administration has provided Kpmg with a reconciliation of the approved budget as part of the year-end audit, and this will be listed in the annual report, which eliminates the need for a reconciliation note. The second recommendation was to review the insurance and holdback payable process to ensure they meet the definition of a liability. For both of these areas, they will be reviewed and reports will be sent out to departments regularly to verify the status of each liability. And the remaining three recommendations are from the 2019 and prior year audits. These recommendations are quite complex and can take several accounting cycles for the results to be assessed by the auditors. The first recommendation involved the capital budget and budgeting for both amortization and contributed tangible capital assets. Budgets for both of these accounts were set up for the 2020 and subsequent budgets, and administration continues to work and review the capital process to ensure integrations and consistencies for Kpmg. The second recommendation was to require developers to provide costing information on contributed tangible capital assets. And this costing requirement will become part of the city's engineering standards, which are being updated for the 2021 season. And we're hoping that this will be done either this month or next month. And the third recommendation was to implement a purchase order policy for purchases with a defined dollar threshold. In 2021, the city implemented a process change for purchases from $10,000 to $50,000, which requires an informal 3-quote process. So that's just a quick summary. The city values Kpmg's comments, and we've undertaken considerable work to address these recommendations. This concludes my report, and I will take any questions.
Thank you, Brenda. Councillor Broadhead has a question.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So let's start with that last one first, the Kpmg recommendation around purchase orders.
Mm-hmm.
In the report, it said between 10,000 and 50,000. And then you said informal 3 quote process. maybe define what informal means to me.
So
Is it-
informal, yeah, it would be getting either, an email. We like to get it in writing, so preferably an email or a memo from the vendor stating what the quote would be. And departments would need to keep those, retain them on file so that when purchasing reviews the process, they can provide those informal quotes.
Okay, so the process is informal, but the record keeping is not so informal.
Yes, correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Yeah.
And the $10,000 and $50,000 figure, was that proposed by KPMG, or is that best practice, or how did you arrive at those numbers?
So from what I can recall, that was developed when MNP came in and did the procurement audit, and it was one of their recommendations. So it wasn't actually KPMG's, it was when MNP came in and it was a best practice.
Okay, fair enough.
Follow-up question.
Yeah, of course,
on that
yeah.
particular one, then I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah.
So Brenda, for anything that's under 10,000, does the department head approve that, or does the CAO have a look at purchase orders, or how does that go? Do you know?
Yeah, if it's under 10,000, first thing is to ensure you have the budget for it. And if there's, any sort of, if it's a capital item, make sure there's a project charter attached. And then it goes through our standard approval process where we require, 2 signatures for every purchase that takes place. One is receipt of goods and the other is approval of the goods.
Okay, thank you for that. And then just finally on this piece, so the recommendation is like your process is happening now, but it's just that your policies and procedures that need to be updated to sort of close the loop?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Back over to you, Councillor Broadhead.
No, that's fine. Great question.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
I could hear you.
Siri can't. Siri, every time I say sorry, Siri shows up.
Sorry, Siri.
Brenda, can you just run through the operating budget presentation, that recommendation? I'm not sure I quite understood what KPMG was looking for and how we reconcile that.
Yeah, this was actually an interesting one. Yeah, and good question. So when we do the budget, as you know, there's various different forms of it. There's a draft budget, there's an approved budget, and then there's what we also call a revised budget. The approved budget is what gets approved in December and council votes on it. Then we also have what we call a revised budget that occurs in the following year in, I think it's April, May, when the tax rate bylaw is passed.
Right.
So between December and May, there can be a number of adjustments to that budget based on, council motions for movement from reserves, adjustment based on what assessment growth was. So historically, we've always presented in our statements and our annual report the revised budget, so the one that comes in May. But KPMG last year, and due to COVID, and also in accordance with our public sector guidelines, has said, no, you need to show the approved budget. So what is publicly approved, posted on the website, that's what we want to see in your financial statements. So, we had many discussions with them. So that's what this recommendation is speaking to. So in our statements going forward, we will show that approved budget as opposed to the revised one, and then show a reconciliation subsequent to that if there's any changes to the revised.
That's interesting because
Answer, yeah.
Yeah, because the tax rate really isn't set until May.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And to me, that's a significant part of what's approved. And so I'm just wondering how they said that you should reconcile that. Is that a note in the annual report, or how does that play?
So it's actually a note in our financial statements. Last year, I think it was I have it here, note 19, where we reconcile approved. We show any budget adjustments And there's also, additional budget adjustments like elimination entries, anything to transfer accounts. And then we get to our revised budget.
Okay. Were they happy with your response? I'm not sure. Actually, let me rephrase that. I mean, our response is our response, I guess.
Yeah.
So
We had many discussions with them. It was a learning curve. It was interesting because, like I said, we had always provided the revised, but according to public sector accounting guidelines, we should be showing the approved budget. So that was interesting. Yeah.
okay, fair enough. Thanks.
Is that it for you?
It is. Thank you.
Any questions for Councillor Watkins?
None, Madam Chair.
I'm good. No, I'm good.
Let me just see. To the recommendation, or number 2 in our report, which was insurance accruals and holdbacks payable.
Mhm.
The insurance payable part of it only claims that the high chance payout will have a corresponding accrual set for the year end. So I guess my question would be, what's an example of a claim that would be for sure paid out and one that would not be? And sort of if a claim ends up needing to be paid out that was thought not to have to be paid out, where does that show up in the books?
Yeah, so there's, I guess, many different scenarios with the insurance payable. Quite often there, situations where, somebody runs into, or a bus has an accident or something. So we're not sure how much insurance is going to be paid out. So we set up a bit of a cushion, right, for that insurance payable. So what Kpmg wanted us to do was be even more accurate and not set up as much of a cushion, set up more of a true liability in what would be paid out. That was what they were getting at for us.
Okay. I think Councillor Brad had otherwise answered my questions. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay.
So we have a recommendation. Would somebody like to
Sure,
come forward?
I'll move it, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
That the Community Growth and Infrastructure Standing Committee recommend to Council that the Audit Management Recommendations report dated August 23rd, 2021 be received as information.
Any opening remarks?
No, I think it's just the implementation. It's pretty straightforward of recommendations they made, and you can see what the city's doing here in the 3 points. So yeah, I'm totally supportive.
Great. Any other comments? Call for question. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thanks, Brenda. And on to the next item of business, which is the review of effectiveness of the Community Growth and Infrastructure Standing Committee. And that's presented, I think, by Marta. Unless, hi, Marta.
Hi, I'm filling in for David today.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. I will hand it over to you.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to present the report about reviewing the effectiveness of the Community Growth and Infrastructure Committee. When Bylaw 40/2019 was passed on November 4th, 2019, establishing the CGISC, it contained a provision which stated that the intention was for the Standing Committee to function on a pilot basis for 2 years. The bylaw also stated that the effectiveness of the Standing Committee would be evaluated by Council before September 30th, 2021 on the basis of an evaluation matrix adopted by Council at the end of the second quarter of 2020. The terms of reference for the Standing Committee were adopted on August 20th, 2020. At the point that the committee was finally ready to begin growing into its roles and responsibilities, the COVID pandemic came to Alberta and caused a major disruption to the city's functions. In particular, in the following months, many matters had to be taken to Council on very short notice. And as a result, many items that could and should have been first vetted by the committee instead went directly to Council. Due to the extraordinary and unforeseen impacts of the pandemic, administration is of the opinion that neither of the standing committees had a chance to become well integrated into Council's governance, philosophy, and practice. Additionally, the evaluation matrix, which is contemplated by the bylaw, was not presented and adopted. Therefore, administration recommends that the initial 2-year trial period for this committee be extended to the midpoint of the upcoming 2021 to 2025 council term, that the evaluation of it and the decision on its continued existence be deferred to September 2023, and that the evaluation matrix be adopted by council no later than June 30th, 2022. Thank you. I can answer any questions you may have.
Marta, maybe you want to, since this was a topic that went through the earlier standing committee today, which I was present at, Community Living Standing Committee, maybe let this committee know their thoughts and perhaps their recommendation that went through.
Certainly, and I know Kevin is also in attendance, so he can jump in and I'll defer to him. But just in summary, the committee did pass a recommendation that their bylaw for their standing committee be repealed. And they had, I think, quite an active discussion. And certainly, I think Councillor Mackay, you were in attendance, so you can also speak to this, about the function of the committee and whether they should continue or not. And ultimately, they did pass a recommendation to repeal their bylaw.
Which I think is alternative 3 in our package.
Correct.
Right. So I just wanted you to know that going forward as we begin this discussion. So Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you. What were the objective measures that they used to define that the committee structure was not working well?
I don't think
Probably not a-
that's not a fair question to Marta.
Well, sure it is, because obviously if it's based on objective measures, I'd like to know what they were.
Well,
If they weren't, then it's subjective and then it's all feel good or not feel good. Is that what happened?
no.
I'll let Councillor Mackay speak, and Marta, you don't have to answer that as far as, well, there wasn't let me just say there wasn't a metrics because the evaluation matrix wasn't done. So then the question came up about the experience, your experience around the committee structure. And in my opinion, that is where the conversation ensued. So I will hand it over to Councillor Mackay to fill in the gaps.
Yeah, and I wasn't because you captured it almost identical in the sense it was. So primarily it was the fact that lacking the evaluation matrix, there wasn't ability to give the feedback that you were looking at. So they then fell back on the need to get this back to a council, whether it came as a committee of the whole meeting or as a council meeting. So therefore it moved into a discussion as to the alternate 1, 2, or 3 on the recommendation. So we as a committee, previous committee, didn't actually identify the specific reasons. There was some anecdotal discussions around the form and function and, the outcomes of committee coming back to council. But the whole crux of the decision based on the fact that there wasn't an evaluation matrix, plus there was the feeling that the business and Councillor Watkins was also there, and he can maybe, this was his point better. So if I get this wrong, Councillor Watkins, you can fill it in. Part of the difficulty moving forward is I mean, this is a committee committee structure that this current term council put in place, and it wouldn't necessarily be fitting to move it on to a council next term to then deal with some of the issues that we're dealing with, because depending on who sits on that council, they might not have the wealth of experience or the wealth of involvement around different committee structures. So they would basically be taking a committee structure that this council had versus, and so they really couldn't create an evaluation matrix, because what would they be comparing it to? Would they be comparing it to something that they didn't even have any experience in doing? So I'm not sure whether I caught that last point right.
Yeah, what I was saying is that we have to evaluate it at some point and make some kind of recommendation as a council, because we put it in place for 2 years. And so to pass it on to the next council and just say, well, then you deal with it, I don't think it would be fair. And I think to just kill it wasn't really fair either. So I think what we have to do is we have to evaluate it sometime between now and September 15th. Whether, and you know, how can we make a recommendation? The recommended motion is impossible because we don't have a matrix. So when you read that there, it says based on the matrix, you know, there's no matrix to evaluate it on. So we have to do something. And I think, like I said, just dump it on the next council. When it was before us, there was GPIC or whatever it was. And then we created this. And now we're going to, after 4 years, just do nothing with it and not assess it or anything and hand it to the next council. I think we just owe it to ourselves to at least assess it before the 15th. And I don't know what that looks like or how we do that, but as a council as a whole, I think we should assess it. That's why I didn't have a vote this morning, but I didn't really agree on just saying just kill it because we haven't assessed it. We didn't have a matrix to assess it on, nor did we have a full discussion of all of us to decide whether there were benefits to it or not.
And to be clear, there wasn't a unanimous vote. It passed. I wanted to make it, I put forward alternative one, make no recommendation, let it come back to council for a full discussion.
And that failed?
That failed.
So those are my points. I think, you know, we have to assess it in some way, and you know, whether you know it fell through the cracks, the matrix or not. Well, that's history, but we should do something.
Well, so here's my point. In the absence of some objective measures to measure the outcome or the efficacy of a committee, what you fall back on is your experience. Did you have a good experience? Did you have a bad experience? This committee has been fabulous. And I say that. We've had great discussions in depth. It's not that we've agreed on everything, but we've never, ever had a bad meeting. And I got to tell you, this committee works. I'm sure the other one did too. So anyway, that's my thoughts.
Mayor Herron.
Put me in a tough spot.
Wes kind of said, so we don't have a matrix and that's neither here nor there. We're probably not going to develop a matrix before the 15th, right, Marta?
Yes, I think that would be quite unlikely.
Yeah, so without that to evaluate, honestly, agenda committee put this on the agenda. So this wasn't on the agenda until agenda committee met, and we decided that let the two committees actually have more of a an experience, qualitative conversation about the committees. I never in a million years would have thought we would make a motion to rescind them, but that is unfathomable to me, and I don't agree with that at all. So I like the motion as it is.
So would you like to move it?
Yeah, can I just say a few comments though?
Sure.
We've had the conversation about committees before this term. Remember, Wes, we had the whole Western Management Report and they recommended committees. We would be probably the only city our size, if we rescinded, to not have a committee structure. Like we are too big to not have the workload kind of split up the way we have done it this term, and I think it's worked. I think the reason it never really got off the ground in previous terms was there was not a lot of trust on council. But if you look at this meeting right now, there's two members of council that aren't here because they trust this group to do the decision making. And well, can you just like council, so you go to everything.
I got no life.
But quite often, like Councillor Hughes, you know, at first she didn't agree with this structure and she was trying to pull everything off the consent, but now I think she's okay with letting us talk about it, and she hasn't pulled much off consent. And so honestly, I think the only mistake we made, and Marta pointed it out over the last year, is not beefing up the agendas and putting more material on the agendas for committee to discuss. But we couldn't because of short timelines due to COVID. So I think honestly, the next council should be making this decision, because if you garner all the experience that this term has and the first 2 years of next term, that's a better an evaluation of the committee structure than just us doing it by ourselves. So if you want, I can make the motion in front of us. but I don't know if anyone wants to weigh in.
Well, my comments will be on debate, not.
Okay. All right, so I'll move that the community,
But I can't reply in
Okay,
debate.
well, do you have?
Well, I would just only just make some comments back. I mean, obviously, so far the comments have been around experience and around perception and around whatever. And so I think those are obviously different from the other committee, the majority of the other committee. So, I mean, and one of their members has got just as much experience in working with previous committee or in previous terms and believe the structure, I mean, there was a lot of reasons and you would have to go back and review them in relation to it. And I can't adequately reflect all of them fairly. So, but I mean, it's the experience of the majority of the previous committee weren't similar to what the last two comments that I've heard. So, and that, I mean, I'm only replying to your comments. I'm not going to get into debate.
okay. I'll move that the Community Growth and Infrastructure Standing Committee recommend to council that section 22 of bylaw 40, 2019 be amended to provide that a council review of the committee's effectiveness and desirability of its continued existence beyond the midpoint of the 21 to 25 council term occur no later than September 30th of 2023 on the basis of an evaluation matrix adopted by council no later than June 30th of 2022. And that any consequential amendments to the bylaw be made at the same time.
Thank you. Any opening comments?
I think probably my comments before were more debate than. So I'll just add that committee structure, I think, goes a long way in a city the size of St. Albert, 70,000 people with lots of decisions being made. And a council of 7 to divide up the work between two committees is highly advantageous. I like the conversation that happens at committee level in that it's a little bit more relaxed. There's more room for change for administration than to mold and massage what actually ends up in council's plate, although not a lot of that has happened. But I do see lots of room for improvement. But you can't do improvement until you do a couple years with the structure. And so, yeah, normal years with the structure. Then I think and the matrix is an interesting thing, but Marta and Kevin, I'm sure, you know, if you know, there'll be lots of ideas to change it and improve instead of just trashing it. So I would rather see things built upon than destroyed. So that's my comments.
Councilor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm going to support this motion for two reasons. One is that we really haven't had a really good feel for what a normal course of events would be like. You can say what you want about the last 2 years, but it has been the unique experience in the life of us all. I don't know that people can point to another pandemic that was worldwide like ours prior to the Spanish flu in 1918. So SARS wasn't like this, but COVID wiped us out for 2 whole years almost. And to evaluate a committee structure or any kind of governance structure based on our experience over those 2 years without some measure of objectivity, I think does the whole governance system a disservice. So I think what needs to happen is that an established set of criteria whereby we can evaluate the efficacy of the committee, how it works to not only do the business of the committee, but also how the entire structure supports the operations of the city as a whole, right? Those two things need to be evaluated fairly because this is 2 organizations in a row that have recommended to our city that a committee structure be put into place, and to just abandon it at this point in time, I think might be premature.
I was just waiting to see if you were going to be there, like you were there in 1912.
No, I wasn't there.
Motion. And it's not because I don't support the committee. It's because I just think we're kind of kicking the can down the road to the next council to assess it. And if we send it to the next council and say, it's not going to happen, but say there's a clean sweep and there's 7 new people, what are they going to assess it based on? The old structure of GPIC, because they've never had that. So what are they going to assess it on? And all those people who've never had the other structure and the new counselors, what are they going to assess it on? All they're going to know is the new structure. So how are they going to compare it? They're going to just say, well, this committee structure is okay. They're not going to have anything to compare it against. I think what we should do is we should have like a committee of the whole meeting or something here before September 15th. Have it facilitated or have asked some basic questions about the structure of it, how it worked, and come up with a recommendation that we can pass on to the next council and maybe kick it down the can with a recommendation for 2023. But to just say, well, yeah, let's just have them do it next year and figure out a matrix next year. I don't know. Like I said, if there's a whole bunch of different people, how are they going to compare it to something that they've never had? We're the ones who've had the 2 systems. We should be the one doing comparison here. And we should get it done in the next 3 weeks. Those are my comments. That's why I'm not going to support it.
Thank you. And so I'll just chime in here. I think it's really important to go forward with an established, maybe not perfect system for the next council. I think that the committee structure is a really good way for new council members to dive deep into issues in a committee way rather than committee of the whole. But I want to go back to when I championed this with you, my intention, and I'm sort of reading this because I wrote down some notes. My intention with this structure was to create an environment that was more informal, more welcoming to residents to provide their own input, to have more thoughtful conversation about issues. For me, committee of the whole structure is just a pre-meeting to council, and I feel like that is just redundant. When we're all in one room, it becomes politically focused. It is not issue focused. And I think that people aren't able to have the same kind of thoughtful conversations and provide their own experience and input as easily. So I think committee of the whole is a little bit of FOMO, which is fear of missing out. And everybody wants to be there to make sure that they haven't missed anything and that they get their own input, but then it becomes just another political scenario that's going to happen again at council. So I think there is a big place for subcommittees to work. The other thing is that why are we thinking it's not working? Here.
I'm not objecting to it. I'm just saying we should assess it before we pass it on.
Right,
I'm not saying I disagree with
but we don't, right,
at all.
but we don't have the information to assess.
We just don't have a matrix.
Right.
But we can assess it. We can discuss it and assess it.
So we're going to give the next council an opportunity to work through this, make their adjustments and assess it. And it's already established, it's in place. I can tell you as a new councillor coming in, I find committee of the whole or subcommittee, standing committee work much less intimidating than committee of the whole. And I think others new to the job would as well. Why is it working for other municipalities and suddenly not working for some on ours? Is this a personality thing? Is this a counselor thing? Or is this just an ability to, maybe it's just the people. I mean, I'm throwing these things out without knowing the answer. And we have growing pains, I recognize that. Subcommittee models are everywhere. They're at the EMRB, they're at AUMA, they're on not-for-profit organizations, they're on school boards. You get together in a subcommittee, you tackle issues, you bring it forward to the greater council, and you debate if you need to. You pull it off consent if you want, and you debate. There is a very strong reason that municipalities have a sub or standing committee model, and that's what we are trying to do here. And it hasn't been perfect because we've been kind of in lockdown for almost 2 years. So I do personally think it's a very efficient use of our time. I think it's good for new counselors. I still believe it's a great place to, pull the onion layers away on all issues, have good conversations. And sometimes, as you know, on committee, we turn turn our recommendations right around because of our good fulsome discussion. And that's what it's meant to do. And I think maybe going forward, we want to be able to invite residents in more readily into some of the topics that we're having, because we haven't seen enough maybe resident input at the committee level. And I think that's one improvement that could really benefit the usefulness of this committee. But I am absolutely in favor of this recommended motion. I appreciate you bringing it forward, Marta, and I think a strong evaluation matrix at a time when the next council has had a chance to work through this with their own growing pains, with their own personalities. I think you'll know what the outcomes will be midterm, and you'll have more of a normal circumstance going forward. So obviously, I champion this. I still believe in it. I think it's a really important piece of good governance. I just don't think we kicked it off and got it going to where we should have or could have under the circumstances over the last 2 years. So yeah, this recommended motion, I'm completely in favor of. And I'll let you close. And now that I've hijacked the floor.
I have a feeling this conversation is very different from the one that happened this morning.
Yes.
Just a couple of responses to debate questions. Ray, I know I've thought of what you were saying about how we've experienced both, and so we should evaluate. But this motion actually, you said, well, what will they assess it against? Well, they'll assess it against an evaluation matrix that council will approve. So
No, I might,
I know,
talking about two different systems.
yeah, I know what you're
They've
saying.
never experienced the other system,
I know.
no matter what kind of matrix.
We didn't
They're not going to be able to
experience-
compare the two systems. They're only going to
We didn't experience this system and we plowed ahead with it. And yeah, but today was supposed to be a day that committees could say what they liked and what they disliked and how it could improve. That was what I thought was going to happen today. So, I was looking forward to that conversation, and it's kind of not happened. For my opinion, I think we need to do a better job at agenda planning to make sure that things do hit committee before they hit council. That's one thing that definitely needs to be improved. I see an opportunity not only to have public present to committee, but maybe even sit on committee. I mean, like the internal audit committee has 3 councillors and 2 public. It's an idea that some municipalities do. So there's lots of ways you can improve this committee structure. And I was kind of hoping we'd have that conversation, but we're now talking about sitting, and I feel like I'm trying to throw a lifesaver in to save the committee structure. And not just for you, Councillor Henson, because I know you're super passionate about it, but I honestly really believe in it too. So I'm going to defend this at council when it comes. And I would encourage all members of council to somehow get their thoughts out there on what worked and what didn't work, instead of just say kill or save. We need to talk about what worked and what didn't work. And that might have to go to council. I'm not sure. Nothing further.
Okay, calling for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, so in favor, Councillor Broadhead, Mayor Herron, Councillor Hanson, opposed, Councillor Watkins. And that's the end of our meeting in 50 minutes,
Job.
30, 40 minutes. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and have a great day. Thanks, Marta.